Welcome to VCR, Vintage Cinema Rewind. We're bringing old movies to new viewers. I'm Blake.
If the ship is still sinking! Ah!
After all of this time, you think somebody would tell them not to run into that iceberg.
Yeah, you think, right? Yeah. I have to admit, the character I related to the most in this movie is the captain or the cook or whatever, who just decides he's going to spend his final hours like drunk.
The baker.
Yeah, the baker. He just pulls a bottle of like scotch or something out of his dresser and he just decides to get drunk. Which, I mean, if you're alone on a ship filled with people you hate and you're going to die in 2 hours, like, what are you supposed to do, right?
Yeah.
I'd probably just be like, all right, like,
Yeah.
maybe I'll let the alcohol poison and get me first.
Okay, I'm going to explore the baker in 2 seconds. I will say that this is our deep dive of A Night to Remember from 1958. If you haven't seen this movie, go back and listen to the primer episode that's
right.
spoiler-free. That being said, the baker, so again, student of history here.
Yes.
The baker, real guy, who survived being in the water for hours. He was like the only person who survived being in the water for hours, and that was because he was lit. Like he drank a lot before he got in there, and so apparently, like, it slowed his heart or stopped like his blood vessels, whatever kind of thing. And
So, but doesn't alcohol constrict your blood? Like,
Yeah,
didn't that
but
kill you faster?
for whatever reason, he actually did survive. Like, and you see later in the movie, right, when he gets to the capsized boat, and they're like, "We can't let you on," and they just kind of like held him on the side there.
Yeah.
like that actually happened. Like,
Wow.
that was real. Like, he was there for hours before they pulled him in, and he was completely fine after. Like, suffered no long-term effects.
It's so fucking funny.
Yeah,
Like,
but I will say,
smartest guy on the boat.
I will say they do him a little dirty in this movie. Like, if you read about him, he actually like was helping people the whole time. Like, he was getting lit, but he was helping people. He actually threw a bunch of like deck chairs like off of the side to like give people life rafts to try to like help people.
Okay,
like,
so he was resourcere. He was
yeah,
smart.
Yeah, he was actually, and so
But
this
he was drunk the whole time.
he was so drunk the whole time. Like,
Yeah.
as soon as he kind of like realized that things were going the way they're going, he just like apparently went back to his room, like drank all the liquor that he had, and then came out and started helping people again. He was actually technically the last person on the Titanic to survive because you know when it kind of like tipped up and like everybody like scrambled to the top. He was technically at the very top of the Titanic and rode it all the way down into the water.
What a fucking Chad.
He's like a legend. A legend. Yeah.
Okay, you're right. They do kind of make him look like a slob in this movie where,
Yeah.
you know, at one point he like pulls out like a dresser and he just pops his feet up, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I would like to think if I was that shit-faced and the world was ending, I'd still try and be useful. When I get drunk, I don't really get drunk anymore, but when I have a couple beers, I'm usually just like, I'd be fucking useless. You would be dragging me behind you. That's how useless I would be.
Honestly, though, like, this is kind of the thing. And I got thinking about this while I was watching this. Like, who would I actually be on the ship?
I think we had this conversation when we reviewed the James Cameron version.
Did we?
Maybe this is a conversation I had with somebody else. Sorry,
Okay.
Go on.
So, because I was thinking about it, and especially I started thinking about this when it gets later, and people, I think at this point, have kind of recognized the true dire nature of the situation. And
Yeah.
somebody goes back down, and there's kind of that waiting room space, and there's like a guy reading a novel, and there's the two guys still playing cards. And there's like a few other people, like the married couple, who are just kind of hanging out there, accepting their fate. And I kind of got thinking to myself in this scenario, like, you know, who would I be? Would I be like the person who's helping other people out? Would I be the people who are freaking out? Would I be the aggressive person? Like, would I just be the person resigned to my fate? I don't actually know. It's tough, right? Until you get into that situation and know.
Yeah, well, I've had this conversation, I think with my mom of all people recently, where it's like, what's that Joker's quote in The Dark Knight? Like, right before they die, people show you who they really are.
Right.
Like, who would I really be when the chips are down and the world's ending, right?
Mhm.
And you know what? I kind of hope I never find out.
Yeah, because there's even like, you know, the people who are panicking, like it's like almost like a mob, like running up to the top of the Titanic right before it's sinking, right?
Yeah, I would like to think that, like, if my friends, like if you and Jess and some other people, or even just a crowd of strangers, I would hope that I would like keep my shit together. But if it was just me, I'd be screaming my head off.
Right.
Right. I'd be like, ah! Like,
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I think I'd be somewhere between being helpful and just resigning myself and going to read a book or something.
Yeah, there is part of me that would just kind of be like, well, like, oh well,
Yeah.
that's too bad.
Yeah. I did write some stuff down about like which of those characters, because again, this movie is relatively accurate. Like there's a whole section in Wikipedia that explains kind of like some of the inaccuracies, but this is considered like the most accurate depiction apart
Okay.
from like one major exception. And the only major exception in terms of inaccuracies is that in this movie the Titanic does not split in two.
Yeah, that's what I did find interesting. That it wasn't until they discovered the wreckage that they found out it like.
Yeah.
And the James Cameron version in the framing device at the beginning, they do a great job of explaining it.
Right.
I almost feel like that's because of this movie, where they're just like, hey, just so you know, the boat actually split in two, right?
Well, they didn't actually know that the boat, like, it wasn't confirmed until 1985 when they found the wreck.
Right.
And there were definitely people, and that's kind of the thing that you always forget about. It's really hard to portray this on screen, but as soon as the lights go out on the Titanic and the ship's like engine room is flooded, it's pitch black and you're in the ocean. Like,
Yeah.
you can't see really what's happening, and anybody who would have been on the ship and had known that was almost certainly dead by the time it was light out again.
I was thinking, like, how did nobody figure this out? I thought there were survivors, but yeah, you're right. They're all dead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, I mean, the sounds of the creaking and everything would, like, everybody heard those noises when they were out on the boats and everything. And there were people who said that there was some sort of large crack or something like that, but it wasn't confirmed. Like, I saw, again, this is me going like way back a few years and like doing my research. There was like all these different theories as to what happened, and like, did it crack here? Did it crack there? Like over the years, kind of the theories kind of changed before they did end up finding it and kind of having that definitive answer. So it's kind of interesting to get back into all of that and like see the kind of different ways that maybe it sunk kind of before they really knew.
Yeah. Can you think about how terrifying that must have been? Like, you're just standing on the Titanic and then...
That's probably what makes it all the more upsetting, right? Is because I've done all this research and I know all this stuff, random stuff about the Titanic, like watching it play out again like this, it's like, it's kind of putting faces to the names and to the experiences, because that's the other thing about this movie is like most of these people are real people. Now some of them are abridged people, like some of them represent 2 or 3 or 4 different people all doing like different things on that Titanic at this time.
Right, yeah. We gotta consolidate some people.
Yeah, exactly. But at the end of the day, like the majority of this story is pretty accurate to what actually happened. Like all of the inaccuracies, and there's a list, but they were all kind of like relatively small things that like really didn't impact it. Like for example, like I think the one other big one about the ship not breaking was that basically he says in the hull that there's like a 300-meter split in the hull.
Right.
But in reality, it basically would have just instantly sunk. It was just like there was cracks along that 300-meter that were all like leaking water, and it's like inaccuracies like that where it's like that really doesn't change my overall like sense of the story. Did you notice that in the beginning that there was like almost like weird like old footage being used? Like,
yeah, I did want to talk about that. They spliced in some actual footage,
so
and it's kind of obvious when you see it.
Yeah.
It must have been intentional.
Yes, it was intentional. Did you do any background research into that?
Not really, no.
I got into it.
I thought that was like background research in the sense of like, why did they do this?
No. Background research into like what that was. Like, because it wasn't the Titanic.
Wait, it wasn't?
Filming. No.
Oh, okay. You're going to have to enlighten me.
So this is a really interesting story behind all of this. And I found 2 different competing stories about what that footage was. I believe the ship sailing away in the celebratory, like, we're casting the ship off kind of thing.
Go in peace.
So that is, I believe, them filming the RMS Queen Elizabeth in 1938. And it's like maiden voyage, like leaving the harbor kind of thing.
Okay.
But there are actual clips from a separate movie about the Titanic that are spliced into this film. And those are spliced in from a movie from 1943, the first Titanic film called just The Titanic. And it's actually a Nazi propaganda film from 1943.
I'm sorry, what?
Yes.
Okay.
So this is where things get wild.
Okay, Blake.
And
I'm listening.
So there are 4 scenes in this movie that are direct like splices into here. It's like just 2 of like the ship sailing away, and then they use 2 clips of the walkway flooding in the engine room. So I did some research into this film from 1943, and so they made this Titanic film to be a Nazi propaganda film, like during World War II. So what they changed
So
was,
it's a German film, I'm assuming.
yes,
Okay.
obviously,
Right.
So it's a Nazi propaganda film. So they made the main character a German. They like created a character and put this German character hero in, and it was supposed to be like a commentary about like the pitfalls of like the British Empire and the failure of the British class system and all of this stuff,
Right.
which is kind of interesting because this is like a little bit of a critique on the class system in Britain at this time.
I mean, both like A Night to Remember and James Cameron's Titanic both have elements of that, right?
Right.
By the way, I just wanted to say that the Irish people in this movie are like really Irish.
Yeah.
You know, I was a little like, I've only been to Ireland for a couple weeks, like 15 years ago, but I was a little like, I'm not sure I'm buying these accents. Yeah. They're after me Lucky Charms.
So other kind of tidbit about this Titanic film, this super controversial movie, obviously, and I don't know if it's available or not. Like it's like an okay Titanic movie, Nazi propaganda
But made
aside.
by Nazis, yeah.
But when it was being filmed, the director of that film said some disparaging thing about the Nazis, and Joseph Goebbels had him killed before this movie was released, and they had another director finish it. Like this is how like into like the Nazism that movie got, like wild stuff, like
okay.
crazy history, and there are scenes of that movie in this movie.
Okay, so I'm gonna walk back what I said earlier. You'd be indignant if The Worst Day of Your Life was made into a movie. Now imagine The Worst Day of Your Life being made into a Nazi propaganda movie.
Yeah!
That is. So what, these British guys decided that they needed some wide shots of their ship, so they took some frames from this old-ass Nazi movie and just stuck it in their own movie.
Yep.
Which maybe there's something liberating in that. It's like, we're actually reclaiming this story. We're
Right.
taking it away from you. But
Yep.
like, wow, that is not what I expected you to tell me today.
Yeah, I couldn't believe it. Like I got in a whole tangent about this other movie, right?
Also,
And, like,
imagine like showing up to work and being like, oh, what happened to my predecessor? Oh, we killed him.
yeah,
We didn't like him, so we killed him. Anyways, finish the movie.
yeah.
Okay.
Uncredited, the other director, like they put it out as like the other director kind of thing, because they didn't even want the Nazi public to know that like they'd killed this guy because of his political views. Like it's a wild story.
Whoa, man. Like, ugh. Blake, because of times we're living in, I almost kind of want to learn more about fascism, just so I know what to look out for.
You should.
Yeah.
I think that is a good idea to
That is-
understand.
I
Know
don't
thy
think-
enemy.
Yeah. You know what, though? Like, 5 months from now, when the fascists take over, they're going to play this podcast where I'm like, I'm strongly anti-fascist. And then I'm going to be like, ah, fuck. And then they're going to shoot me.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
whatever. It was worth it.
What a tangent. What a time to be alive.
Tell your dad. I hope I'm killed by fascists and I don't die in like a really stupid way. Like, do you know how Kurt Vonnegut, the famous author, died?
No.
He was walking his dog and he tripped over the leash,
No.
bashed his head on the concrete, and
Oh,
died
no.
2 weeks later. Yeah.
Huh. No, nobody goes out dignantly, but
Yeah, no one goes gently into that goodnight.
yeah. But
Anyways.
I sure don't hope it's like a surprise trip on the leash kind of deal.
What if the fascists are like, we're going to kill you, Michael and Blake, so here. And then they pull out dogs and like with leashes. And I'm just like, oh no.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Okay.
The dogs don't even eat us. They just throw us over their leashes.
Let's circle back to the Titanic.
Yeah, all right.
What I did find interesting about this movie is how much time we spend on the other ships in the area, and like how much time we spend kind of getting a better idea of this world. So the first one we kind of spend time on is the Californian, which is the ship that actually spots the icebergs and did signal back to the Titanic, hey, there's icebergs oncoming. We've stopped the ship for the night because we don't want to get into this ice field, and tried to warn them. And at that time, the guy who was kind of doing the Morse code, he was too busy to really take that warning. He was too busy sending out personal messages from all the rich people on the boat, and sending
Yeah.
them to like New York to send it to whoever for when they got there.
Right.
It's pretty wild to kind of see that play out, and then like later on.
Well, but like this is the paradox of humanity, that like as a species we're capable of so much wonders, but we're also so fucking stupid when you get down to it.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to kill the mood.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You really killed the mood.
Yeah.
I had kind of known beforehand that there was another ship on the horizon that the Titanic saw the lights for, and they obviously weren't rescued by them. But I guess learning more about kind of what happened at that point, like I'm not sure that the 90s Titanic spends as much time on this idea.
There was no other ship in the 90s version.
I think there potentially was like a light on the horizons, but they never show from the other perspectives, right?
Right. Well, they do. And this is kind of what I was talking about last week about how they do really show like just how inept authority figures can be in this movie, right? Like they cut back to this captain a couple times, and every time they're like, hey, like we think something's going on, and he just kind of brushes them off each time.
This movie is honestly like more than anything just kind of like a sales pitch for having like regulations and rules in place and like a structure for humanity to follow because we're all so dumb.
Yeah, no
because
kidding.
It's really upsetting like watching this movie, and there's like the two guys who are out on the outpost on the Californian who are going, yep, there goes the fourth rocket being fired off the ship. Yep, there's the fifth one. Something's not quite right here, but we don't know what's going on, and they're not responding to our light that we're sending them back, so, like, maybe it's okay.
It's probably fine.
Yeah.
Probably wouldn't even worry about it. Yeah.
So now, like, maritime laws, like, are very, like, you know, this is how you operate in these scenarios, and, like, and so it's interesting kind of seeing that point in time and being, and I guess getting frustrated about it because, yeah, like, the Titanic sinking actually did impact, like, all of these rules and how these things work now, right?
Right, and they did a great job. They have a sort of like a title crawl at the end where they do just kind of say like, hey, like this sucked, but now there's different rules in place so that hopefully this never happens again.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I
guess back then it was just kind of a gentleman's agreement.
Yeah.
Like, you know?
And again, it's probably part of it was a lot of other countries and like each country having their own rules and regulations and they're not being, because it's international waters, not like this uniform way of kind of dealing with a disaster situation. But
yeah,
now there is kind of that in place. And the Titanic is the reason behind that. Or largely the reason.
I think I read, and again, I did a cursory amount of research for this episode, but like they did actually find out that other ship, the California or whatever it was called, they actually were too far away that they couldn't have really done much in time anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but still.
As infuriating as it is, ultimately they would not have been all that much of help. And that's the problem ultimately, like with the Titanic, is they didn't have enough life rafts on the ship because, and this is a really, I guess maybe at that time there was more ships operating on the ocean, and I don't even know that, but at that time, the life rafts were just supposed to ferry you from a sinking ship to another ship, and that's why there wasn't enough to carry everybody on board.
Yeah.
And it's just like it's again one of those things where it's like, how did you not consider the possibility that nobody is like around close enough to be able to come and help you?
Well, there's that great moment in the 97 version where Rose is getting a tour of the ship and she says like, hey, like you don't have enough life rafts for everybody. And don't they I forget what he says exactly, but it's something like, yeah, well, you know, too many life rafts are going to like get in the way of the aesthetic, right?
Right.
I will say I wasn't very engaged by this movie personally, don't at me, but there were some moments of human drama that did get to me. For instance, I forget the characters' names, but you know, there's that guy with the pussy galore and their 3 kids, and they have this moment where it's like women and children on the boat, and pussy galore doesn't want to go, and he's just like, no, come on, like take the girls, like, you know, I'll be right behind you, etc., etc. It's clear that he understands he's going to die, and that he'll never see them again, but he has to put on a brave face so that they'll get in the boat, right?
Yeah. And he has like that great line where, and I'm going to paraphrase it, but he essentially says like, I would never ask you to do something against your wishes, or I'd never demand something of you, except in this scenario.
Right. It's very British in the sense that he's like, you know, ushers onto the boat, and then he like squats down with his 2 daughters. He's like, all right, like look after your mom for me, kids. And then he's holding his son who's asleep. And just because his son's asleep, he's just something like, oh, like I'll miss you, my dear son. And then passes him off. A lot of the times acting in these old movies can be a little hokey, but like it's great how he's like smiling and waving as they're being lowered, and then as soon as they're out of eyesight, you see his face fall, and he has this like, oh fuck, I'm gonna die look on his face.
Yeah, one of the best performances in the movie,
yeah, like true masterclass. And just, again, just how he's like, he knows that if he shows any fear, his whole family's going down with him. So he's just doing what he can.
Yeah, and I mean, that's kind of the ultimate tragedy of this movie, is that having to watch the goodbyes over and over again, right?
Right. And there are a few great moments. There's one moment kind of later on where, there's this older couple, obviously they've been together like 50 years, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And the wife is like, well, I'm not leaving without my husband. And the steward or whatever is kind of just like, well, like, I'm sure no one would object to your husband coming with you. Cause again, they're super old. And the husband just kind of says like, no, like, we're staying, like, give our spot to someone else. Right.
Yep.
The implication is kind of like, we're old. We've had a good life. Like, give our spot to somebody else.
We've come this far together. We're not going to leave each other at this point.
Right. And like the wife chooses to stay. So like moments like that are very
and actually happened, right?
Yeah, right. By the way, that's how you know you married the right person. If they're that ride or die for you. Like...
Which actually, again, reading stories about this, so there was one guy who abandoned his family to try to get to another ship.
Right.
And I think this is probably who like the Billy Zane character is based on, because he did end up getting on like that like flipped over life draft or something later on, but the rest of his family survived as well. And they ended up divorcing him like a couple years later because of like, the emotional impact of having your husband abandon you.
I don't know I don't think any couples counseling in the world is going to heal that.
No, absolutely not. And then again, speaking of villains, like the other main villain of this movie, the chairman, who ends up just like solemnly walking onto one of the life rafts that are not all that full, again, taking the place of somebody else.
This is kind of what you were saying. Like, what do you do? Like, women and children, there's only so many seats. Like, are you a gentleman and do you offer up your seat to like someone worthier or someone more vulnerable, and do you go down with the ship, or are you just like, fuck it, I'm getting on the boat?
This is the other thing too, is like at this point in time when they start lowering that life raft on, there was barely any people on that life raft, like, and so they weren't calling other people to go over there because it was on another side of the ship. And do you just hop on because there wasn't anybody else to hop on? Like, it's just like there's all these impossible to answer questions unless you're in the moment. But that guy, like that real person, he made that decision, but then the rest of his life was miserable from what I understand, because he lived with that survivor's guilt for the rest of his life. Like, he was fired, people hated him.
You're talking about the guy who abandoned his family?
No, I'm talking about the chairman.
Oh, the chairman, yeah.
Like, he basically lived out the rest of his life as a recluse.
How would you do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and even like talking about the husband who abandoned his family, let's say the family doesn't survive. Like, how do you move on from that?
Yeah.
Because it's kind of like, remember Humperdinck in The Princess Bride, where when they defeat him and they're going to kill him, and Wesley's like, no, let him live, so he has to live the rest of his life knowing that he's a coward.
Right.
It's kind of like, fuck.
Yeah.
I think I just get drunk and go down with the ship.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe I'd get drunk and help and somehow miraculously survive.
Yeah.
Another moment that really got to me is when the old man finds the little kid. And the little kid's just like, I can't find my mummy. And again, he's this very kind of like warm grandfatherly presence. And he's just kind of like, oh, we'd better find her then. And he just picks the kid up. And like, you see them later that they survived.
Right.
So I guess that's the other thing too. In a disaster, like as an adult, you have to look out for the kids.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do if you find an unattended child at a sinking ship?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I found it affecting how, again, it's this very, like, older man, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he's very, like, chipper because he doesn't want the kid to freak out.
Yep.
So
it almost is better in that situation for you, too, right?
Yeah, because now you have to be an adult.
Yeah.
You have to be selfless.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know, something about that moment, just the old man doesn't even hesitate. He's like, well, let's find her. He just picks him up and they get away.
Yeah, there's so many moments like that in this movie. What's frustrating on the flip side, though, is like all the other people on there who don't understand the gravity of their situation, right? And like, especially like the first class people, the people who are like entitled to
the rich
like,
twats,
who are like angry that they're being forced on the life rafts and like causing all of this chaos. When it's like, if you had moved a little quicker, like, and I'm sure these are the questions that these people had the rest of their lives, right? Like, if I had moved quicker, if I hadn't have resisted it, like, would more people have been able to get on the life raft? Like,
this movie almost kind of reminded me of what's that DiCaprio movie, Don't Look Up?
Yeah,
where it's kind of like, in the face of this giant existential threat, you've got these very small-minded people who aren't taking it seriously, right?
Right.
And yeah, like you've got the old rich assholes playing cards while all this is going down, right? Like,
Yeah, but I mean, some of them like are also kind of resigned to their fate. In
yeah, that's
fairness to
fair.
a couple of them,
That's a bad example, but like, yeah, you would think like, and again, I hate to bring up the COVID again, but like, you would think if something like this was happening, there is a large portion of people who just wouldn't fall in step.
Yeah.
You know, they wouldn't believe what was before their own eyes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or again, like entitled, like, oh, like I'm not gonna die, or like, why should I do this or why should I do that? When it's like, if you'd moved a little quicker, if you'd followed the rules a little bit better, like somebody else maybe could have gotten on this life raft.
Well, there's that one moment where this like rich old lady is kind of like, oh, like what's going on? They need to. She's kind of like, we had to go here. Now we're over here. Now we have to do this. Like, oh,
Yeah.
perish the thought. And I'm like, I hope you die. I hope you go down with this ship.
Well, in a normal horror movie, they would, but
Yeah.
that's not this case, right?
Not in reality.
And now I actually wrote this down. Like I was kind of surprised, like how calm the evacuation was.
That's the other thing I noticed too, right?
Yeah.
Because the James Cameron version, because it's focused on Jack and Rose and blah 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 blah. I almost said Finn and Rose, as in like the Last Jedi, but because it's so focused on them and the evil ex-boyfriend, it's much more bombastic. This one really does. I think that's part of the reason why I'm like, so did it take like 8 hours to sink? Like everybody seems pretty chill about the whole thing,
Right.
but I guess like, what do you do, right?
Well, and I think that's credit to all of the crew of the ship who like, they say right before, like, we need to keep this calm and orderly. Like nobody like really let on to the dire situation that we're in. Like everybody just do your jobs, be professional, and we're going to get out of this kind of thing.
Right. Spoiler alert, not a lot of them got out of it.
No, but again, I was kind of surprised. I didn't realize that Charles Lightoller actually survived. Him and like a few of the other of the ship's crew like survived on the overturned life raft, like the final one that was like an inflatable light raft or something like that, like that they almost didn't even get off the ship in time kind of thing. That whole scene was wild when like the water's coming in, they like just get it, like they accidentally flip it too, and they don't even have time to like flip it back before they're in the water.
Right.
I also want to say that like Charles Lightoller is a fascinating character in history. Like I did some reading on him after, and like he went on to do some really crazy stuff. Like he was in World War II.
Uh-oh.
So you remember, did you watch Dunkirk? Like
No, I didn't.
Really? You haven't seen Dunkirk yet?
Yeah.
Okay, so for people who have seen the Dunkirk movie, there's a character in the movie who brings his kids along on just like a personal raft, like his personal like yacht or whatever, to go and rescue people from Dunkirk. That was based on Charles Lightoller, who actually did that in real life. Like he took his own personal boat and sailed across the channel to rescue people. Like he was a
real man,
real fascinating character,
real
in history.
Giga Chad.
Yeah. He also was accused of murdering somebody. So there's a lot of stuff. Like there's a lot of stuff about him.
He lived
online.
a full life.
He lived a life. Very interesting character.
You'd think
in
after
history.
surviving the Titanic, you'd never go anywhere near the water ever again. But I guess he was okay.
Yeah. I did find it interesting that they focused on him as like the closest to being a main character over anybody else, right?
Yeah, he's got that main character energy.
A little
right?
bit, yeah. And I kind of got it watching this movie. Like it is jarring in a sense, like the difference between James Cameron's movie and this movie and who they decided to portray. And I wonder if James Cameron almost didn't show as much of Charles in his movie just because maybe he felt like his story had been told accurately and well enough in this movie that he didn't have to rehash that.
I almost wonder if James Cameron kind of thought like, okay, like people have already seen this movie, so I'm going to do my fantastical weird version, right?
Yeah.
Not weird, but my romance, my Finn and I did it. My Romeo and Juliet on a boat, and then the boat's going to sink.
Right.
What
do you think of the minis, the special effects in the movie?
I actually thought they held up.
Yeah, so
they
did I.
They did pretty well. I mean, there were no real moments where I'm like, well, that looks fucking ridiculous.
Yeah.
You know?
Like the minis, you could tell like when there were minis on screen, but otherwise, when the ship's kind of starting to rise up, like all of those effects were really great.
Yeah, like it looked good.
Yeah.
You know, it kind of reminded me of like the OG Star Wars, where I'm like, this still. it looks good and it still looks good.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Like, that was something that I was actually somewhat surprised about.
Yeah.
Since this movie is like almost 70 years old.
Yeah, and it looks okay. It looks pretty good.
It looks pretty good.
It looks pretty good. I guess that's the advantage of practical effects over CG, right?
Mm-hmm.
I actually just for those of you at home, while you were talking, I just passively Googled. So apparently 1,500 people died on the Titanic.
Right.
But 700 survived.
Yep.
So I guess if you're on the Titanic, you have a 1 in 3 chance of living.
Right.
Okay.
Correct.
That's not bad.
That's pretty terrible. That's like one of the worst accidents of all time on the ocean.
Okay.
I think it's the biggest loss of life, potentially, other than maybe some military ships. But even the military ships, I don't think would have been holding that many people.
Yeah, and just because of a fucking iceberg, too.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you...
I'm not going to let you have a positive note on that. That was terrible.
What?
1,500 people died. God damn it.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, it's obviously a disaster, but I'm heartened that at least there were survivors.
So here's the thing, is with the life rafts that they had on the boat, and this is, again, a problem with the time, they didn't actually teach the sailors how to actually put people on the boats and how many people would actually go on these boats. So, like, even like Charles himself was afraid that they were going to put too many people on sink these.
Yeah.
But they figured with the life rafts that they had and had out that they had enough room for another 500 people at least on the life rafts that ended up surviving.
We could have, a lot more people could have survived.
A lot more people could have survived.
That's really sad.
Yeah.
That is sad.
Yeah. So stuff
Fuck.
like that where they just, like, again, because there wasn't proper procedures in place, they just kind of did whatever and hoped for the best, essentially.
Yeah, there's a lot of human error in this story.
Yeah, and that's where there's a quote near the end of the movie that I found, like, really ironic, because one of the rescuers says, everything humanly possible has been done.
Well...
And and that's where I was like, well, everything humanly possible would have been you guys actually had enough life rafts on board and everyone actually was trained on how to use them. You know, this, that, and the other thing kind of thing, right?
Yeah, you know, it's funny. I've been thinking about taking some safety courses, you know, like CPR. You know, a lot of places have, like, the defibrillators now if somebody goes into cardiac events.
Yep.
You know, especially if I'm going to, like, have kids someday, like, I should really know how to do these things.
I can't be around all the time to save your family from...
Right? So for those of you who forgot, last year, Blake, I, and another Mike were having dinner. Some lady started choking. Me and the other Mike just looked at each other uselessly, and Blake stood up like a superhero and gave her CPR. It's pretty wild.
It was pretty wild.
Yeah.
It's still, like, one of the craziest things that's ever happened.
Was that a Chuck's Roadhouse?
That's why nobody else was helping.
Yeah, I know. Can you imagine dying at a Chuck's Roadhouse? That would suck.
Well, I can't.
Yeah, so anyways...
Yeah, I like how the intro of this movie also, they do a thank you for all the survivors and everyone for sharing their stories and everything. So this is kind of moving into sequels, prequels, and reboots, but this is actually based on a 1955 book by Walter Lord.
Yeah, I think he was also a screenwriter on this.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah, good for him.
So he wrote A Night to Remember, and he was actually a kid at the time that this happened, so this was kind of a lifelong fascination for him.
I guess so, yeah.
And one of the other screenwriters on set. And I think it was the director who was also a kid at the time when the disaster happened. And so he actually, at this point in time, in the 50s when he wrote this book, I guess the fascination with the Titanic had kind of started to wane, and so there wasn't a lot of care about it. And then the book came out, and all of his research and all of his interviews with all of these people kind of reignited that. So right before this movie comes out, there was actually a television series called the Kraft Television Theater, which essentially every week they did like a theater production, but a TV episode. Like it would be like an hour long or something like that. And George Roy Hill actually directed the episode where they did the Titanic. It was like a massive hit because it was based on this book as well. In 1956 is when they did that. George Roy Hill, I believe, is the director of
Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Yeah, I think you're right.
So yeah, like that's one of his early works, is doing the TV show for that. Yeah, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. I thought so.
Hey.
And the Sting and Slapshot and all those other movies that he did with Paul Newman. Anyway, that's a tangent.
Well.
Yeah, so I mentioned as well that like several of these characters on screen are actually like combinations of a few different people. I did want to note that like Charles' character is a combination specifically of several people's roles like during the disaster. You know, he gets a lot of credit and he deserves a lot of credit for what he did, but there was also other people who, because again, representing 2,000 people on a ship in 2 hours is impossible.
Yeah.
So people have to get combined. There was other like the other notable characters that I noticed on this watch of this movie. It was called the smoking room, is where all those people are kind of like hanging out and sitting, and waiting for the end. The guy who's just reading a novel, did you notice him?
No.
So there was a guy just kind of reading a novel, and as I think it was the architect kind of walks by him, and they kind of nod at each other. So that was William Thomas Stead. He was a famous writer at the time. They actually had notes of like that he was last seen down there reading and waiting for the end. He actually in 1886 wrote an article about how the mail steamer went down in mid-Atlantic by a survivor. And so he created the story essentially where a steam ship hits another ship, and then because of a lack of lifeboats, a bunch of people die in this story.
So
and he was writing cautionary tale about essentially like a lot of ships at that time in the 1800s didn't have enough life rafts for everyone, and he prophesied that someday a ship would have a situation in which there would be a mass loss of life because of not good safety protocols, and he ended up being one of those people.
Well, okay, so you're saying he manifested this. Okay. Wow, what a way to go. Just sit there reading, smoking a cigar, just being like, I fucking told them.
Yeah.
They wouldn't listen.
And then, like, for example, the representation, like the Irish third class people, like, and trying to like get out, and that kind of like side love story, like that happens between the Irish guy and the Polish woman.
Yeah.
That's the inspiration that James Cameron took and decided to expand on, like that story.
Mm-hmm. Which was a smart move.
Yeah, absolutely it was. And again, like James Cameron did so many other cinematic things to enhance this being like a blockbuster film, right? But that character, he said specifically, was inspiration for Leonardo DiCaprio's performance and like what they did there. But
yeah, he's kind of like the proto Jack, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Even he was like based on some real Irish people who helped some of the third class women and children get off, because not a lot of the third class people did survive this instant because of like the class system and them not getting the same opportunity to get on the early ships, right? Or the lifeboats. Just wild. A lot of the quotes and like scenarios that happened and like people on board at this time, like a lot of this is like literally directly ripped off of the memories of the survivors that the writer wrote about in his novel from 1955.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess that is the advantage this version has over the James Cameron version, is that this one is almost like a first-hand account.
It is still, yeah. Which is just wild, right?
I don't know, were there any Titanic survivors still around in 1977? 1997? Probably, yeah.
Probably
right?
like some older ones, right?
Right.
But nobody who would have like, you know, there wasn't any adults at that point. You were probably not, there wasn't probably too many 100-year-old people left at that point.
Probably not. It was probably like a baby who escaped Titanic.
Yeah, or like some of the younger kids that survived, right?
Imagine being like 4 years old and surviving the Titanic and having no memory of it.
Yeah.
It's just spending your whole life just being like, huh, that was fucking weird.
Yeah. Jesus. But no, they actually, like, while they were filming it, and effects and filming now, so while they were filming it, they actually had, in addition to the book, they brought on some survivors to be consultants on the film. So the fourth officer, Joseph Boxhall, who was on the flipped over life raft with Charles, he was one of the consultants on there. Like, he was literally one of the guys on that raft, as well as Edith Russell and Lawrence Beasley. One of them also tried to get into the movie at the last second. Like, it was during the scene where the whole ship goes down, and he tried to like get into the frame like right at the last second, and they had to boot him out because of like legal reasons.
Yeah. What's going through your head?
It was like a representation, like, oh, like I didn't deserve to come off the boat, so I'm gonna like, you know, portray me dying.
I'm gonna go do it again. Yeah.
But
weird, man.
I mean,
I guess I respect that.
yeah.
If they're gonna make a disaster movie about my life,
The only reason why they didn't allow it is, again, because of union reasons. So
yeah, that's pretty funny. They probably wanted him on the frame. They're just like we're gonna get hell from the union about this, so get out.
that's exactly what happened.
Get out.
They filmed this above the RMS Astorius, which was already in the process of being dismantled, so they were only able to film the one side of it, but they did use that, which was a ship built similar time as the Titanic. They wanted to use one from the same company as the Titanic, but that company was not okay with this. So
Like, hey,
that
come on
did
now.
not happen. And they filmed it in a reservoir for the lifeboat scene because they needed a big enough space. Like at that time, there wasn't enough a tank big enough to film all of the survivors.
Right, because that's how Cameron did it, right? He
Yeah.
had a big old tank.
Yeah, I think in Hollywood now they have like a really massive water tank that they
Tight.
film stuff like this in. Yeah, there's a really funny like quote about
I think I saw the same quote. Like
Yeah.
the first extra who jumped in the water.
is Roger Moore. No, it was,
Oh,
or
yeah,
not Roger
right.
Moore. It was, what was his name? Kenneth Moore, the guy playing Charles. No, none of the extras wanted to jump in. And so he basically was like, it's fine. Let's hop in the reservoir. And he jumps in and he's like, it was so cold that it almost knocked me out. Like,
Yeah.
and then he's like, I tried to warn people, and then everybody jumped in anyway,
Yeah.
right after. So
No. Yeah, that's pretty funty.
yeah. One other crazy story that I found reading about this, I think it was Jay Yates. I think it was the guy who was the gambler, who was kind of the swindler gambler.
Yeah, that guy.
So there was initially a story that he was on the ship and didn't survive, but that was debunked really quickly, and he actually was trying to fake his own death so that he didn't get arrested by the police. So
Now that's a swindler.
yeah. So he was trying to fake his own death. Like he sent one of his mistresses, like he gave her a letter saying this is a confirmation that he was aboard the ship at this time under an assumed name and that he died. And I think at the point this movie came out, they did know about that, but they still chose to like put him on there and like that person.
You know, you're like a true blue swindler when, as the world's ending around you, part of you's like, oh, I can use this to my advantage, right?
Yeah.
I can fake my death to get out of all these gambling debts.
Right. Yeah.
You know, some people have to write The Godfather to get out of gambling debts,
Yeah.
or you just have to survive the Titanic.
Yeah. And that's kind of all like the big effects and filming stuff I want to talk about. Like there, you can go and read like so many of the stories of the survivors online.
I have to admit, my interest has peaked a little bit. I'm a little curious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's worth your time. Like I genuinely have spent probably way too much time with the Titanic, like more than anybody who's listening to this podcast probably.
Well, I think I
has.
made fun of you a while ago when you said, what's that movie, like Commander in Chief or something?
Oh, yeah, Master and Commander?
Master and Commander, how I made fun of you for being in your boat phase.
Yeah. I've just always been in my boat phase.
Like-
Which is funny because like I'm not even a big fan of being on boats. I just find like these kind of stories just wildly entertaining.
It's kind of fun, yeah.
I think it's the exploratory like nature of it. Like, you know, like there's a quote and I don't even know what it's from where it's like born too late to explore the world, born too early to explore the stars.
Yeah.
And that's always really resonated with me.
Well, maybe we can go halvesies on a boat when my book starts selling.
Yeah, but you missed the part. I said there's nowhere to explore left anymore.
we can putz around. I don't know.
We're everywhere at this point. That's
Yeah, you're
that's a
right.
damn shame. Anyway,
Maybe we'll get into a space boat and explore the space stars.
I don't have many notes about the score. The one thing I was going to say, though, is on set when they were raising the ship to like eventually like drown it, they put like microphones on the ship to capture the noise, all of the creaking of like the mechanics of doing that, because the creaking actually sounded like what the ship actually was sounding like when it was creaking and groaning and sinking.
Right.
Which I found really kind of genius that they were able to capture that.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I think it was one of the actors or one of the filmmakers was just, they noticed that the ship was making a creaking sound and they're like, hey, let's just use this.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's very serendipitous, as my mom would say.
I don't really have too much else to talk about, so why don't we get into the personal reviews and the partner factor? Here's the thing. I mean, I guess talking about this now is like we kind of already did the Titanic as like the historical event. So
yeah.
like there was kind of stuff on this watch and on this research that I didn't know about from the other Titanic because of the change in the focus. But I already talked about a lot of the events that happened that night, right? So
We sure did. So go listen to the 2022 episode.
yeah.
We did.
Yeah.
Ho ho.
But personal reviews and the partner factor, I guess I'll start because I was definitely higher on this one than you.
You definitely were.
And I think I'm the highest on this one out of all of us that watched it because Jess watched part of this with me and she was really stressed out and then she went to bed. But
That's what you do, Blake. You stress your wife out and then put her to sleep.
yeah. But she also she had kind of a similar viewpoint as you and I did, where like when you take out the romantic element, like it does kind of lose some of its juice.
It becomes more of like it almost becomes like a history special at that point.
It's less of a film for entertainment rather than like a film to be studied.
Right. And I hate studying. I have always hated studying.
Whereas for me, like again, I genuinely thought this movie was pretty successful. Like I thought that this movie held up for a movie from 1958. The way that it was filmed, I found a little jarring at first, especially in that first 30 minutes. Again, it didn't feel very cinematic, but I was like, okay, well, you know what? Like, I understand. Like, I've seen the cinematic version of this already. Like, it almost would have been weird if this movie was just like as much of an adventure film as Titanic or like the Poseidon Adventure or something like that, because it almost would have been like treading on the same kind of in reverse.
It probably would have been in worse taste too in 1958 when the survivors were still alive.
Yeah.
If you want to do a fun love story, you almost kind of need like a 70-year gap, you know?
Yeah.
But you're right. I actually, like my personal review, I think we already know, I wasn't that keen on this movie, but it did make me respect James Cameron's version more.
Yeah,
you know?
sort of me as well. Like you can really tell like James Cameron, the storyteller, and see kind of where he approached this and like what he lifted from this and what he didn't. But like you can see even in this like the kernels of the ideas that he had. And
yeah, you can definitely, James Cameron, the storyteller, looked at this and said, okay, yeah, I know how to make a blockbuster out of this.
Yeah.
And then he did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in part because of his lifelong fascination with all this stuff and like him wanting to go down in a scuba dive, or not scuba dive, but go down in a submarine and see it himself.
Yeah, fucking
He
weirdo.
literally made the movie to be able to fund his own adventure down there, which props to him.
You gotta respect James Cameron. The guy
so much, man.
The guy just lives his life, you know?
Think about it. Like, if somebody would hand you a bunch of money to live your dream, like, how do you not say yes to that?
Exactly. So, fair enough.
Yeah.
If anyone wants to hand me and Blake a bunch of money so we can live our dreams, we're accepting.
I honestly, like, really like this. This isn't a movie that I'll come back to often, but I definitely, last night while I was looking through movies, I considered watching Titanic because I was kind of like, yeah, it's been a few years again.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to go back to the James Cameron version. That actually might be his last great movie.
Yeah,
So-
there's probably a few people who think the same.
Is there a new Avatar movie coming out this year?
Yeah, this winter,
okay.
probably, like number 3 now?
Yeah.
The fire one. We're
Is it
going to the fire
Is
one.
it Fire? All right.
Yeah.
I'll probably go see it, but I'm going to be...
Yeah, we probably will go see it.
But we'll
It's probably going to make like $2 billion this game.
Yeah, that's what's funny about the Avatar movies, and this is such a digression, but it's like nobody seems to remember them, but they keep making billions of dollars.
Yeah. I barely remember number 2, and yet there are like moments, especially in the third act of that movie, that I thought were like actually pretty cool.
Yeah, you know, I think we're in the same boat here, pun intended maybe, but yeah.
I would go back and revisit it for the action sequences and I think we almost have to refresh our memories. Like I did do that before watching the second one. I watched the first one over and here's the thing. I watched both of them 2 years ago when the second was coming out.
I remember.
I
was there.
thought the first one was pretty good.
Okay. It's actually been closer to 3 years.
Has it?
It was
I guess
2022,
so,
yeah.
Wild.
I think I had just started on this podcast when that movie came out.
Yeah, maybe.
Shit, so
Yeah.
he just keeps getting to make his Blue Monkey movies.
Yeah.
Good for him.
Until he dies.
Till he dies.
I think at some point he's planning on actually handing the franchise over to somebody else, but like the thing is that it's all in his mind that like
I think he's doing 5 of them or something.
yeah, he is. But I don't know if he's doing all 5, you know?
Yeah. I gotta respect, like, because, creative energy kind of ebbs and flows, right? Like, I did a first draft of a new book earlier this year, and now I need to step away from it for a few months to refresh myself and get energized in the story again.
Right.
So I have to respect that this guy's just sunk like 30 years into these fucking Blue Monkey movies,
Yeah.
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 Somehow
So,
this became the James Cameron podcast.
I mean, it was inevitable we were going to be talking about James Cameron.
All roads lead to James Cameron.
I think that is a night to remember. I hope that you had fun with this episode. I feel like we talked more about the actual Titanic, which is honestly kind of what I was expecting rather than the cinematic portion of this. Because, again, this isn't really a cinematic film, more so that
it's very much like Threads. It's a docudrama.
Yeah. You almost have to talk about, like, the ideas more than the film itself.
Yeah, it's almost kind of one of those movies that, for me anyway, it's more interesting to talk about than it is to actually...
Yeah.
It's more interesting to talk about than it is to experience, which isn't quite an insult, but it's a bit of an insult.
It's just a little bit of difference of the times too, right? And also, this wasn't necessarily what you were looking for, but for somebody like me, I genuinely enjoyed this.
Right, the Titanic heads.
Yeah.
The boat dudes. Right.
Boat dudes.
Boat dudes.
The sub guys. All right, we will see you next time, I guess, then.
See you next time.
Tell your father.
Tell your dad. Stay out of...
It's Father's Day. We're recording this on Father's Day.
Happy Father's Day
Happy
to all the
Father's
dads
Day
out there.
to you, too.
Yeah.
Neither of us are fathers.
All the dads, living or dead.
Okay. What a dour note.
Well, mine's dead, so.
Alrighty then.
Happy Father's Day.